think we didn't get it, but it's glad to come back.
Okay. Well, there's no way I could leave a message, and they don't have a way to
So I'll
specifically.
just-
we'll just
Capital
go
T
there.
Trust.
Yes.
Capital T Trust.
And they did,
I was
yeah.
thinking exactly the same thing.
Yes,
I saw it permeating
we'll get the
through,
perfect
through the dome.
vantage point.
Ah,
So I wanted to also mention something about trust. I was selling my home, and for whatever reason, well, I guess it was a tough sell, but the time to sell a home. But I had somebody through a friend put a kind of a intention out there that the right and perfect family would come and find that home, and it happened.
wow. Wow.
So it's putting the energy out there and trusting.
And having done all you can before that, that's the key.
Right.
That's why we're saying it's capital T Trust, not just regular trust. That's very important. I mean, we're in that situation now. We're part of that manifestation of trust. We need something to reshift and leverage our income. You know, we need to get something going. So, in that very situation of the application of capital T Trust right now.
I'm keen to work on that.
Right, to get to the practical application of this in terms of income generation. There's a pressure on
The
that.
energy's into that.
Right.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, so we have to get something going in a hurry.
No pressure, Miles.
Oh, there's pressure for us. There might not be pressure for Miles, there's pressure for us. I don't know how your pressure is financially, but ours is starting to get dire, let's put it that way. So, alright.
It's so amazing,
We'll get,
like all
that's
the
good.
stuff.
Energy leverage.
Yeah.
Energy leverage. Leverages it to more. Alright, so this story is the module. It's actually a story, but kind of, well, yeah, it's not really a story. A life detective and trust. Okay,
This
we
is
go.
what, session 3?
This is, yes, it is. No, this is module 7,
Ah,
which is now this one. I don't remember what the name of the module is. And those the module names
they don't matter anyway, right?
no, they do. They do a little bit.
I'm teasing.
I know you are. That's John's mischievous,
That's
Yes.
it.
yeah, and this. yeah.
Mr. M.
Bastard. So see, it says Miles. Miles has done 0%. It tells me there how much you've done. Miles has done
0%.
Right, progress, you know, because you mark them as complete, it shows that. So, yeah, it's just kind of fun.
I'm slacking.
No, cancel. No slacking on this ship.
Right.
Yeah. We've got to get to the planet Astarius. in,
Nobelia, that's the planet. Come on.
yeah, Nobelia.
Right.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, but that just makes you sound mad.
Oh, really? No, Astarius doesn't make it sound bad. Module 7, owning the new way of living and feeling real. So this one, it's the third one. It's kind of a bonus session. And I actually I might move it to the first one of the 3 because it does connect to the previous module, which was almost all trust and all that. So, but it's more about being the life detective, and then it connects to the trust in the end. All right, so we're going to look at an exemplification and practical application of what we have learned from the perspective of how this applies to us so far. The idea as we go through the following is for you to ask yourself, check with yourself by connecting how much of the following is you and how much also can be you should you choose. So going into this, we want your perspective on saying, whatever's going to come, how much of this is me and how much of this can be me. Right? So again, you've been coming at things from, you've been especially really awesomely diligent in coming at the course from a instructor perspective, right? Which has really been useful, you know? It's been profoundly transformatively useful. Because you say, well, it's kind of doing other stuff, but hey, I need to be able to retranslate it, right? So it's been very valuable. Now we're going to take the same thing, but in a personal context. The next stuff that's coming, we say how much of this is already me and how much of this can be me, right? So for argument's sake. So, all right. A life detective is all about doing. Just a little quote. Okay, no picture. I haven't had a chance to put the fun stuff in here. So, all right. So we're going to go through a bunch of life detective key points, or spirit warrior, new noble, Jedi, etc. Just the life detective is the key, but it can be any conceptuality you like because all of them have this in them. But for our purposes here,
Is this where the dev is going to get involved? And
yeah, kind of, a little bit. But you looking at this of how much of this does apply to me. So we're going to say these are life detective key points. In other words, these comprise what comprises a life detective or what's relevant, what's appropriate.
Okay.
So a life detective, for instance, key points. Humble, unobtrusive, yet authoritative, confident. Involved in their own doings, outside the system, not concerned with image, often underestimated, shows teeth and asserts themselves when needed, in no uncertain terms, pays exquisite attention, never assumes, checks and tests assumptions, asks questions, not afraid to be ignorant, doesn't let go of an anomaly, no matter how small, subtle without being obvious. Alright, so
can I add one?
Oh, please do.
Being curious, being.
There's more coming, so
Oh.
yes, it's there. Right, so the key here is to look at this and say, how much of this applies to me already? How much of this, now if it doesn't apply, can it? So okay, so we say humble, unobtrusive, yet authoritative and confident.
I'm extremely humble.
Right, and also sometimes unobtrusive, but yet you're authoritative and confident. Right? You don't always have to be in the forefront. And just because you're humble and unobtrusive doesn't mean you aren't authoritative or confident.
Being obtrusive?
Unobtrusive.
Unobtrusive. Being, okay. Yeah.
Right. You can be, in other words, you can be
I think
humble
it
and
would take
unobtrusive.
confidence to be,
Unobtrusive, right.
or to take the back
Right, sometimes.
seat.
Right, but the point is,
Or it could.
you can be both humble, whether you're unobtrusive or not is irrelevant, but yet authoritative and confident, both, right? Humble, authoritative, and confident. Yes?
Yeah.
You have that, Miles?
Mm-hmm.
All right, very cool. Okay, involved in their own doings? Yes. That's it. You're involved in your own doings. You know, you're doing what you're doing. It's very important. You're outside the system. Very important.
Yeah, what does that mean to you?
Well, that means you're not a slave of convention, in other words. And again, you're stepping a little bit beyond the regular, and from that beyond point, that's where you are able to leverage and make the most difference.
Yes.
Right? And that's
You're
where
outside the circle, so you can put pressure on
Exactly.
wherever you
it's
do
also
it.
a foundation for your authority and your confidence. If you just the usual regular system, well, it's not, it's just, you know, it doesn't really mean much. You know, it can sometimes, but we're looking at this from this life detective point. If I want to actually kind of really figure this mystery out, I have to come from outside of the system, right? That's the key point of it all. So it's we being a life detective, we're figuring out life.
That's what
itself.
Neo did in The Matrix.
Precisely. Step
You
outside
can
of the system.
Put
Exactly.
pressure from the
Exactly.
outside. You
Exactly.
can't really do it
Exactly.
from the inside. It's more difficult. It's
Right. Or Cook, when he had the test, the no-win scenario, right? Remember, he went and he rewrote the test, stepped outside the system. I know, who's a Star Trek fan? You know, I'm a Star Trek
Yeah, I
fan.
watched that. That's what
Right.
we
So, well, when you graduate from the academy, they do, there's a specific name for it, it's the name of the ship that's involved, but it's a no-win scenario and they force them to go through this test. But Kirk didn't have to lose in that because everybody's forced to lose. He rewrote the actual program, the test. He changed the test itself because he didn't want to have that loss.
Yeah, I don't remember that exactly.
Right. Anyway. Okay, not concerned with image, obviously, often underestimated. Yes, that applies. We don't care if we underestimate. It's not a problem.
actually that
Because
can be
we're
a
not
good
concerned with
thing
image.
too.
Shows teeth and it asserts themselves when needed in no uncertainty terms. So just because we underestimate it and we're unobtrusive and we're humble doesn't mean we won't show our teeth.
Right.
If need be. Okay? Pays exquisite attention, never assumes, those obviously go together. Checks and tests assumptions, asks questions, not afraid to be ignorant. That's a very big point. In the context of the people that we're dealing with in the courses, we cannot be afraid to be ignorant. Yes, you're a thought leader, but that doesn't mean that you can't show what you don't know and you can ask, hey, I don't know this, I need to know. No. Very, very important. That leveraging of vulnerability is very important.
It also clues into being curious
Yes.
and open to new
Exactly.
possibilities and new perspectives.
Absolutely.
But it's very important to understand that and not be afraid of ignorance because we think we are going to lose our thought leader position if we share ignorance. It's not so. It's a myth. It's not actually true. Okay. Doesn't let go of an anomaly no matter how small. That's really, really critical. That's absolutely vitally essential in what we're doing in the bigger life context here.
Remains aware, basically.
Exactly. But the anomalies specifically, you can't let go of those anomalies. You have to come to resolution. All right, subtle without being obvious. That's very important when it comes to our posting, to be subtle without being obvious. Well, we need immense subtlety to deal with the various ranges of perceptions and awarenesses and personalities and all that. Right?
Mm-hmm. How people will interact
Right.
with it.
To that topic, we were talking to last night, I think it was, about how Myles is trying to structure his responses so that they can come to their own conclusions.
Correct.
Mhm.
Correct. Now, our longer term agenda is also there is going to be a practical end result, like you were talking about with the mentors and the mentees. Yes, it's a free thing, but also you have the option to do your own, to do their course, their product, and pay for something. Which is, yes, a lot of mentors do things just for the pure joy of doing it, but they also have a business to run, and they also have a livelihood to make, which is the same for us. We do this for free if we could, but we have to. So there has to be that subtle but yet obvious at the same time. So yes, I'm being subtle about the fact that I have a service that I'm offering. I don't want to push it in your face, but it's obvious. Well, duh, obviously this is what I do. I'm a life coach. That's why I'm a mentor, because I'm a life coach. Being subtle and obvious at the same time. I don't push it, but it's obvious. I don't hide it either. It's very important because of the ethicalness of it. If, on the second hand, if I'm mentoring you and you really want to take things further, and I don't make it obvious that I have those extra services, how ethically can I justify not making you aware of that and having you that opportunity for you? I have to, right? Because I know that there's something more you can go. If you really want to need that more, I have to make it available to you, right? Subtle yet obvious. All right. Adds trivialities and insignificancies together to look for pattern and significance.
Say that again, please.
So, Life Detective adds trivialities and insignificancies together to look for pattern and significance.
Mm-hmm.
So even in little insignificancies and in the trivialities, we look at the pattern and we start to put that together and say, oh, there's something more together. So, sometimes you can get, for instance, other life coaches coming into your group. They join, and they're seemingly being trivial and insignificant in their little posts, but what they are doing, they're starting to establish themselves as a credibility, as an authority figure. Why? Because they want to lead your clients. See what I mean? You see the pattern and say, okay, out you go. Right? So that's important to pay attention to trivialities and insignificancies. And see the pattern there. Right. Pay close attention to implications. That's huge. That's just huge. That's just huge in every single possible thing. To pay attention to implications. Once we start to train our brain to look for implications, everything changes. Because through implications, any implication, right? Just any implication. Through implication is how everything can mix together. That's it.
Oh, okay.
Right. So the implication of appropriateness is, by implication, if you're looking to be appropriate, by implication, I have to determine what my goal is. I can't determine what's appropriate if I don't have a goal, right? And if I'm saying in what context, because one context, so I have to see. So the implication of appropriateness is directly goal and context. Very simple. So everything has an implication. And we need to be masters of implication to see what's going there. When we do, we see the fullness, and we are able to shortcut through that haphazardness of communication. When you start listening to the like for instance, somebody unsubscribed to the mailing list, and I said, any particular reason? They said no, just no. What's one word? No. Well, what are the implications of that? If you're saying no, that you don't have a particular reason for unsubscribing, why the hell are you unsubscribing? That's the implication. It doesn't make any sense. Why would you do it if you didn't have a reason? Obviously there's a reason, duh. So if you're saying no and just no and nothing else, by implication, the reason is one that you don't care to share, which means not a particularly impeccable reason, right? Kind of crappy reason, or one you don't feel justified. Implication. So just from that one-word answer, I now suddenly have an insight into what is potentially going on. Now, maybe it just means that they're lazy and they don't have too much effort to explain it all. All right, that's also that. But either way, it's implications. So when we look at implications, we get to see more. So implications are really awesome. A lot of implications. Okay, no pretensions about themselves, obviously that's, there's no self-importance. Honest with themselves and about themselves, absolutely essential. Doesn't give others, regardless of status, any unnecessary due. Right, so that's very important, as
Any unnecessary,
due, right. So we're just treating everybody equally, right? Don't matter who you are, where you at, we give you your, the due that just appropriate due as a human being, we give that to you, right? We don't treat you better or worse or whatever, Understands that character has nothing whatsoever to do with status and success. That's really huge. I mean, you see people who come into the groups and they've got status, they're a big shot in whatever their field is. It makes no difference to me, Your status and your success, your character is more important to me than your status, and the two are not separate. You can have no success whatsoever and have plenty of character, right? So the two are not related. People mistake that. They think because you're successful, you must be a good person or
It's
something.
perceived value.
Right. And that exactly the perceived, and also the mistaken assumption that you must be something special if you have success. No, this means you can be a special crook. As we know, some people who tend to get our marbles
just
going.
because you can get elected to the
Yeah.
White House
Exactly.
doesn't mean you're,
They have good character.
right.
Exactly. Everyone can be anything underneath. Very profound. As a life detective, that's huge.
Don't
and-
judge a
and-
book by its
Right,
cover.
and I'm going to relate this very much to the context of our groups. Because we get people in the group and we post and they post stuff, and when we realize that, sometimes what they're posting is not necessarily what they're underneath, right? There's a moreness there often. So it's very huge then. Okay, always courteous and polite, doesn't flinch at the moment of truth. That's very important. Two separate things. Okay, always courteous and polite, kind of obvious, don't really need to be in there. But doesn't flinch at the moment of truth. Just a simple thing, but very obvious.
It's a moment to learn rather than
Right,
Yeah.
exactly.
remain ignorant.
Right.
Yeah.
The courage to explore and be open to learn new
Courage.
things.
Right. Watches intent and demeanor. It's very just watch his intent and demeanor. Right. When we watch somebody's intent, specifically in a real world thing, that's why I like to see people, because when you say what is the intent here, you look for that specifically in their demeanor. Oh, it's a profound question. You really you clue onto a hidden kind of world out there just by having that awareness of intent.
Then you'd
Magic.
recognize the
You
narcissist
ask that.
before
Oh, absolutely. Or the criminal. or
because
whatever.
they're
Right.
charismatic and
Right.
they know how to
I mean,
ooze
you
and
just ask,
schmooze and
you were asking
whatever.
about changing Trump. I don't want to come back to Trump all the time, but this is a profound way to change. Ask, what is his intent? The whole book, eh? Now, when you start to watch him from what is his intent, all that stuff that he said changes. You can't, if you have any kind of perception at all and perceptivity, you can't see it. You can't not see it. So it's huge. Okay, and demeanor too. It's the same thing. Demeanor is expression of intent. Okay, he's finally aware of balance. That's very important. Very, very important. If we're looking at just our life situations, just look at the balance in the flow of your posts. That suicide post, it disrupted the balance of things, right? You are finally aware of that. So this is our exercise to see what of this connects to you, right? You perceive that balance and how it could potentially throw things out. What was the intent of your response? The overall intent was to restore balance, or to make sure that they would remain balanced, that it wouldn't throw things out of balance, or being preemptive, right? So if we're being a life detective in any situation, we're really kind of looking to make sure things don't go off, where things can go off, how can we fix them? That's it, balance. Look for where things are out of balance. As an engineer, you're looking to solve a problem, you look for where things are out of balance. Very simple. Right. So, same thing. This could just as well be the life engineer instead of the life detective. Same deal, no matter really. Okay, runs through scenarios in boring, excruciating details to verify. So when we want to figure stuff out, we have to do that. To go through each iteration, each step. If we really have a mystery and a puzzle and a problem, we've got to be prepared to go through that excruciating detail to figure it out. And well, that's where Mr. A comes in handy. We're going to leverage him and say, Mr. A loves the excruciating detail. Fine, we'll make Mr. A go through it. Okay.
Leveraging what now? What's the-
Mr. A. Mr. Anal. Yeah, we have profound anal sides. All of us have it. We have to leverage them to say, Mr. A loves going through excruciating. Okay, now's the time I'll let Mr. A out and I'll let Mr. A have his jollies and kind of do all that. Fine, brilliant. It's like when I do my accounting. Okay, Mr. A loves doing accounting. Cool. It's a good use for Mr. A. For the rest of the time, he can be a pain in the ass. He can be anal and he can be a bother. So we have to kind of save him up for those things. Very useful. Takes whatever time and effort is necessary. Neither are considerations, only impeccability. Oh, neither are a consideration, only impeccability. So that's the thing. We take whatever time is necessary. And that's neither are a consideration in itself, only impeccability. So in other words, we'll take whatever time is needed and effort. We don't care. It's impeccability that rules us. We can't say, well, this is going on too long. Am I being impeccable? Have I done my impeccable best yet? Is it needed for more? Oh, then I go, oh no, I go as long as it's needed because impeccability is the criterion, not time or effort, right? That's huge. That's really huge.
If I can add, sometimes if you're trying to be too perfect, we're not getting it
that
done.
too. Impeccability.
So that's the balance.
That's exactly. A spirit warrior is a master of balance, precisely. Right. So it's the flip side is this now not, am I being impeccable? Am I being overly thorough? Am I being overly cautious and all that stuff? So yeah, you can overdo it too. Understands the leverage of self-importance. That's very important. So we're looking at this as our life detective too in this case here in terms of we're kind of solving riddles and mysteries in life and specifically we're dealing with people. And when dealing with people we have to understand the profoundness of leveraging self-importance. Not our own but theirs. We can leverage it. We can use that self-importance as a tool to get what we want. Appeal to their self-importance, for instance. Just say that. Or, okay, they're making a post that's all self-important and you don't want to say, man, you're just kind of bragging yourself up and you just make yourself look good. Oh, that's a nice post, and then you point out something else that's, and you kind of comment at some humble point or whatever and say, yes, there's another side to this or something like that. You can kind of diplomatically address it and kind of bring it down a little bit. You don't like go the max of what they will say, you're just being crappy. It's kind of, you can leverage their self-importance by maybe just giving them a little bit of a pat. Sometimes people just need that. Understands the psychology of others from their point of view, like assumption of similarity, etc. That's a big point there. Most people come from the psychology when they relate to you, they just tend to automatically assume you are similar to them in most likely. Everybody in the world is more or less a variation of them. They cannot conceive of others. That's a really powerful psychology. You're going to run into that very much. You probably have already. Where people assume you just like them and, well, not really, no. But they only can relate to people from that point of view. So you have to kind of educate them and make them aware that, you know what, when you really scratch people, they're actually way more different than they are alike. You really get into it. But to know that they relate to you and to others from that point of view, it's very useful. It's very helpful. In being a life detective, because we unraveling the mysteries of life, right? Allows others to exercise their agendas. That's very important. And leave others to do their shit sometimes, right? The agendas might
Let
not be
others
the best
be.
words. Right.
Yeah.
Because again, you see, I mean, all the
So,
people that post in our posts,
I mean,
they have a range of
you and
agendas. And all those
in
agendas
terms
don't
of
necessarily
relationship.
match with ours, but
In terms of letting others
can't
be.
stress about it, right?
Yeah. Because he is, yeah,
Nothing I can do really,
Yeah.
other than to support
yeah, let him be. Yeah.
and
One
consult.
of the hardest things to
Yeah.
do in life is to let others be.
Yeah.
Just
But
incredibly
in
difficult.
reference to
Especially
my brother,
family. Yeah.
what I can do
Right.
is being impeccable is
Exactly.
to support him, love him, console him. I can't really change the situation.
And then after that,
Yeah.
that's when you got to learn to let him be, or at least
Of
make
course.
that point. But you know how many people cannot do that? They do their thing, and they still cannot leave them be. They keep insisting. At some point, you got to say, I've been impeccable. I've done everything I can do. Now I've got to let him be. The rest is up to him. It's very
Because we
important.
all have
Very
our
important.
own
Own parts, our own
view
journeys, our own
of-
struggles.
of the world
Right.
and how we interact
Right.
with everything, the world at large.
All right. Never makes points of ego or demonstration of self-abilities. Obviously, we don't push ourselves in that way. It's very simple. It's very obvious to us maybe, but not to everybody. they think that they need to do that. No,
So in that would be, never force my opinion on others.
that's one point of it, right? Exactly. Or you're making a point for ego reasons or to demonstrate your self-abilities. It's not necessary.
Self-promotion.
Right, right.
Yeah.
But it could be subtle. Like sometimes we might feel in the context of the group, for instance, that we need to demonstrate our self-abilities for the purposes of credibility. Not necessarily demonstrate your expertise, and the credibility is going to come automatically. Don't do it for that agenda, that intent. Alright, keeps power to self, to oneself. And that's kind of important. Yeah, we want to make sure that we don't squander our power and just waste it on anything and nonsense. And to be very frugal with our power. Because if you just kind of spread that power every which way and out, you're just very soon going to become drained, and then you're going to be useless to everybody.
Energy management.
Exactly, exactly. And then take it to the next level, which is power management, obviously. Same thing, exactly. Always initiates and dictates into action, even
way,
though they...
From a physics standpoint, power is energy in motion.
Exactly, exactly. Yep, that's the definition of...
That's an emotion.
Clever.
Right. Energy in motion is emotion. Always...
No, energy, emotion is the demotion of energy, the non-motion of energy.
When you feel
Oh.
it. Brilliant. Yes?
Well, I want to get this point down.
Right.
What was the formula?
Power is energy in motion. It's actually energy times time. Energy in motion. Energy over time.
That's huge.
And we take it one step further to say, thus, power is specifically deliberately utilizable energy.
Yeah. That's a practical way of looking at it.
Say it again.
Power is
Utilizable.
deliberately utilizable energy.
The use of energy is power.
But deliberately, when you can
Right.
deliberately use energy, that's when it becomes power.
Your personal
Otherwise,
power.
right. In other words, if you can't use it,
Deliberate
it's
personal.
just there. So when you harness power, harness energy,
Harnessing.
it becomes power.
That's more apt.
Right, but when you harness it, that's when you're deliberately making it utilizable.
Yet, at the same token, you can't just... deliberation is something that cannot always be employed when
Right.
it comes to
No,
power.
but you're right. But that's going in the biggest. The deliberate use of energy, not deliberate use of power. Deliberate use of energy is what leads to power.
Yes.
Yeah, so I've
Yes, and
modified
that you
it.
can do.
The deliberate use of energy is personal power.
Yeah.
Because it's
Yes.
deliberate implies that
Right.
you're using it deliberately,
Therefore
personally.
personal,
Right,
yeah.
right. Yeah, I should say personal power. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm sorry, I'm an engineer.
No, I love it. It's
That's-
fantastic.
yeah,
Oh,
I
I love
love it too.
engineering. It's brilliant stuff. I mean, this could be the life engineer, same thing.
Yeah.
Always initiates and dictates into action, even though they don't say much, and they set the theme.
What?
So they always initiates and dictates into action, even though they don't do or say much. They set the theme. So you can, even though you're not necessarily saying much, you can dictate the theme and flow of things simply through your presence of being and your awareness and your style and your mood and your power, your personal power. So we don't always have to be giving orders and directions of what to do. We can simply be there from a leadership point of view now. So.
Easier said than done.
Right. So right. But when you initiate and dictate into action, even though you don't do or say, that's when you really are claiming and taking charge of a situation. So it's very powerful.
Because you could employ yourself via mood, via
Inference,
stance,
intent,
yeah.
attitude, demeanor, posture, stance,
Lots of
exactly. Everything.
ways to express.
Communicates on the underlying grid where there's no BS.
But there's no fear?
BS,
Yes.
bullshit.
Oh.
Right.
There's
So
no fear. Oh,
No,
right.
yeah.
So in this context of being our life detective, we can communicate,
have
or
a
being a
BS.
spirit warrior, or being a life engineer, all of these things, we can communicate in direct ways that bypass our surface communication. We call it the grid or the grid work. It just there's a
Yeah.
different way of communicating, and in that way, that
Oh,
there's
we
a
should
realness
touch on
there
that.
on the grid or the grid work. There's no bullshit there.
Yes.
Everything is.
So read that again?
So we always communicate on the underlying grid work where there's no bullshit. So we not only say things, but we're also connecting on the underlying through our intent, through our demeanor, our posture, through implications, through the allness of us. We are communicating a moreness and a directness, and on that stuff we are saying real truth. This is where it is. Yes, on the surface we may have to say things nicely and couch things, but let's say I'm dealing with a narcissist, and now I'm in a situation where everybody else is there. On the grid work, on the underlying, I'm communicating, buddy, I know exactly what you're all about. They know, I know, they can see it in my awareness, they can see it in my demeanor, there's a direct communication. But yes, I'm hello, Mr. Friendly, and it's all nice and well. They know, I know exactly what they're about. On the grid work, there's no bullshit, they know precisely what's going on. Very useful and very powerful. And when we understand that we can communicate there, sometimes we don't even have to say anything, we just have that awareness. But it's extremely powerful because it's very direct when we get to where we need to be. Yeah? Useful.
Yeah, then people can't play their game. They can't run their, they
And
play their
you can't be
game.
manipulated.
Yeah, because
Right.
it's like, I know you,
Exactly.
you know I know you.
And because
So
it's
now you
on that
can't come-
underlying
yeah.
mechanism, they know it's for real. Because it's
Yeah.
on that grid work and there's that deepness there. So. Okay. Trust their own ability to put together the conclusions well before the facts present themselves. That's kind of important when we're trying to figure stuff out. I mean, this is our context of being a life detective, right? We have to trust that. We can't always wait for the detailed stuff to get together because we want to be preemptive. So we trust our own ability to put together, to extrapolate, and also just to come to conclusions and to be sensible and to be rational and logical and put it all together to figure stuff out before the facts present themselves. So we're kind of being one step ahead of the game always. We don't necessarily have to wait for the facts to present themselves.
So this is something that military does. They don't have all the information. They have whatever information they have. They start making
Hypotheses.
hypotheses and whatnot, and then they adapt as they get more information.
Correct, correct. So as a spirit warrior, that's it. We're always a matter of strategy. And it's very useful when just dealing with regular people too. It's like, man, this guy kind of shining me on and bullshit. They're trying to take me for a ride. I don't have to wait for the facts to present themselves. Dating, the same thing. You have to trust your ability to put that pattern together that this ain't going to go where I think it's going to go. And I have to trust that. I can't wait for the actual facts to prove that they're just full of shit and they
Yeah.
I have to trust my ability to put the facts together ahead of time. before
Red
the-
flag, red flag.
Well, you have a good eye, don't you?
Exactly.
Well, you have a good eye for that, right? You pretty much see who it is that you want to date or
John, every single person that I know that's dated more than a couple of times, that's had regular,
Yeah.
dates, they all have that ability, they just don't want to pay attention to it. They, when you start talking to them and listening to them, they all bloody know it, they just refuse because they're desperate. And desperation is a disease of futility. Terrible business. So they go on dates that they know they shouldn't go on, that they know a shit before they've even started. They all have that ability to do that. They just don't want to listen because they're so desperate for the date. They're willing to sell out.
Settle.
Yeah, settle for, never mind second best, settle for like 200th best. They're just willing to settle because they're desperate.
Settling is an act of desperation.
Pretty much, for most part, yeah.
Yeah.
What other part could there be?
Well, divine orchestration in
Well,
terms of,
you just could have low standards and say, well, okay, I'm willing to take the risk because I'm just horny. All right.
Or low self-esteem.
Right, low self-esteem.
well, that's all I deserve.
this. But
Yeah.
again, it's
Yeah,
all,
like you
you're right, there
said,
isn't
yeah.
really anything else when you get down to it. It all does come into the world. Does that come? It's pretty much all some variation of desperation. And that's why I like that quote, by the way. Desperation is a disease of futility. Isn't it?
Disease of what?
Futility.
Futility? Or disability, as you
Yeah,
said.
it's not going to work out.
It never does when you act from desperation. Inevitably, when you act from desperation, it is a fuck up waiting to happen. Almost always, right? It's almost always an act of futility. So I call it the disease of futility. Huge. Is able to accept a perspective regardless of how odd it may seem or how little there may be to support it. Yet.
Say again, please.
As a life detective is able to accept a perspective regardless of how odd it may seem or how little there may be to support it.
Open-minded.
Yet.
Or how little they,
Or how little there may be to support it. Yet. Because they trust their ability to put together conclusions. So, it may seem weird at the start, but because there's some evidence, there's some logic, there's some rationale, even maybe an anomaly, to support this weird perspective, just because it's weird, that's not enough to say, I can't support it. They don't care whether it's a weird perspective. It is what it is. That's the truth, right? You have to just, it is what it is. Yet, because they know if you persist and you stick with it, you're going to find someone to support you, or that perspective. Believes in their intuition. Believes in signs, anomalies, outside intervention, assistance, etc. That's very important when we're a life detective, to not realize that it's all just up to us. There's a moreness to life that comes. It's not that you're superstitious, it's just that there's that moreness, and you're going to use that in the most sensible, rational, exquisite, impeccable way. You're not going to be superstitious, obviously, because that's just kind of silly and pull yourself in, particularly impeccable. Right, the life detective is willing to gamble, experiment, take chances when needed. Sorry, Myles, you were right. I was going to.
Okay.
My bad. I'd like to hear what you write in life, by the way.
Now?
Anytime, always, every time.
So I'm creating this kind of a post here. The creator versus the victim mentality. And using a lot of these, you're basically creating your own reality through being a life detective, or however, a life
Taking
engineer.
responsibility.
A life creator, basically.
Or life engineer, right?
So
Which is a nice way to say it, because we're engineering our reality rather than creating it. We're engineering it.
Well, it's also
Same
the
thing.
creators in, I mean,
So the creator takes responsibility, says things happen for me, inquires, zooms out, not concerned with image, embraces. Actually, I'm gonna do this back and forth. Creator takes responsibility, the victim assigns blame. Creator says this happens for me, victim says this happens to me. Creator inquires, victim assumes. Creator zooms out, victim is immersed in a bubble. Creator is not concerned with image, the victim is concerned with perceptions of others and lets them guide them. Creator embraces change, victim fears change. Creator wants to grow, victim fears discomfort. Creator seeks truth, victim runs away from truth. Creator understands others' actions are not about them, victim takes others' actions personally. Creator values others for their character, victim values others for status. Creator responds, victim reacts. Creator uses discernment to act appropriately, victim acts from a limited point of view. Creator surrenders, victim controls. Creator leverages emotions and circumstances to create new personal reality. Victim allows emotions and circumstances to dictate personal reality.
Oh, that's really
Brilliant.
cool.
Yeah,
That's really cool.
love it.
That's really
I
cool.
love the counterpoint.
yes,
Because it really
Yes.
makes it pop.
Right.
yes.
Right.
And
Okay.
also people can see and read in terms of
Mhm.
where they at
Right.
along that.
There may be a few more to add to that, so I hope you're going to have more space somewhere.
Coming.
Okay. Whatever it
Bring it
takes.
on.
Bring it
For a
on.
life detective, they do whatever it takes. Whatever it takes, I didn't even say do, it's just whatever it takes, that's it. They don't care, they don't have a limit on. Whatever it takes, that's it.
The victim will give up
Exactly.
prematurely.
Exactly. Whatever it takes. There's no limit on that. None whatsoever. It doesn't matter whether it be attitude, mood, feeling, mindset, perspective, activity, it doesn't matter. Whatever it takes.
Mm-hmm.
The more interaction, the more the actions and activities have to be extended, the easier it is to see pattern and improbability. So the more we interact, the more we get to see pattern. So we know that. Sometimes if we don't understand, interact more so that you can see the pattern and you can see the flow. So it'll come. Trust, wait a little bit.
Seeks to understand.
Seeks to understand specifically pattern and probability. But yeah, seeks to understand is enough. You can condense it right in there.
And then the other one would be
The opposite.
Right.
seeks to be right.
There you go.
What is
That
it?
would be seeks to be right.
Oh, yeah.
Right. Exactly.
Brilliant.
Or to agree, but seeks to be right.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. 'cause
When
that's
you
more-
unhook from that agree or disagree or right
Right.
or wrong, then you just understand. It's that duality or that unity that transcends that nonsense duality. Very powerful. Uses force of circumstance. That's a very big point there. Very, very big point.
Expand on it.
Right.
That's
So
kind of
a
what I
victim
said.
is at the mercy of force of circumstance, whereas a warrior or a life detective leverages and uses force of circumstance to guide them, to give them direction, to reveal things, to see where answers are. So
and
when
to
you
temper themselves.
right, so when you're looking at life as a mystery, and particularly in a more shorter context, we've got to deal with some problem, which is a mystery, just shifting it, perspective shift. So we're problem solving, really. That's what this is, right? So that's what I said. It could be just as well be an engineer. We're looking to problem solve. We understand that sometimes the force of circumstance will show us that pressure of how to resolve the problem. So, I think of a good example of force of. It's very difficult to come up with specific examples of force of circumstance, but try to think of it in a dating circumstance. Okay, you set the date up and you weren't quite sure. You're looking at it, and everything in the date just starts becoming against the date working out. You know, the waiter spills coffee on you, and all this stuff happens, right? So, well, force of circumstance. I'm going to use force of circumstance not to keep persisting in, but to say, oh, it's trying to tell me something, and use that to leverage yourself out of things, or to provide an answer, or to give you a direction and a pathway. So force of circumstance is very profoundly significant in revealing deeper truth for us. Quite magical. Okay. And makes their own circumstances to force reaction. When we really want to solve a mystery or a problem, particularly when it comes to people, sometimes we have to create circumstances that put pressure and leverage a little bit. Now, this is not just on others, but on ourselves as well. So, for instance, you've got a troll in the group, and they're really being an arsehole. You can create the circumstances where you say you run a poll, and you say, well, if you can solve, if you answer on this poll, or it's not a great example, but okay, whatever. If you give the answers to this poll, if you answer yes to everything in the poll, then you can stay in the group. You're forcing the circumstance for the troll to kind of reveal themselves. It's not a particularly good example, but you see what I'm trying to say. We can sometimes create a circumstance to bring people in the forefront. Or you just ask an open question for it.
Or you could simply block the troll.
Yeah, you can, but sometimes you don't know if they really are, if they're already in pain. So, why not check it out. Okay. Practices and is adept at connecting to more from little via implication. That's, again, it's a master of implication. We have to be masters of implication, because when we really pull out those implications, we must find them all, right? Implication is attended to with exquisite care. That's important. That's very important.
We have to.
Right.
Yeah.
We have to take exquisite care when paying attention to implication. There's always
Because
those
the
implications.
narcissists, they work via implication. They utilize implication.
This is the
up to
last
the
of the bullet points. Trust their own ability to put together the
We got that one
conclusion.
already. That was on the last slide too.
Trust their own ability to put together conclusions well before facts present themselves
Yeah.
already.
Trust their own ability.
Yeah. So, is able to accept, is this the same now? Is able to accept, I guess so. Implications attended to with exquisite care. Oh, I know what happened. Okay, looks beyond the frame. That's the last point here. That's a huge point. Looks beyond the
Is
frame.
that
Zooms
meaning the
out.
same thing as the overall perspective?
Yes, yes.
Overview?
Right.
No
Exactly.
immersion bubble.
Exactly. But you know what we say, look beyond the frame. Take a murder mystery on TV. I'm trying to figure out who it is.